Music to Code By is taking the developer world by storm. Now there are 6 extra tracks available online in addition to the original 3. That's 9 Pomodoros of pure productivity just waiting for you. Check them out at mtcb.pwop.com.
.NET Rocks, episode 1217, with guests Martin Woodward and Beth Massi. Recorded Wednesday, November 4th, 2015.
Hey, guess what? It's time for .NET Rocks. This is Carl Franklin.
And this is Richard Campbell.
Both in the same room.
Yeah, this is kind of luxurious,
In
isn't
Microsoft. Building 16?
Yeah, we're in Building 16, and it's been nicely renovated. It's one of the older buildings.
Yeah.
It's all asymmetrical now.
That's very cool. And I just love being here because it's like another world.
Yeah.
You know?
Now we are inside the bubble right now.
I was thinking about that. Bellevue. Was Bellevue so big before Microsoft came around? I mean, it looks like a real big metropolitan city.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
and
a little.
Apparently housing's got expensive there, too. It's become quite a thing. It's along the water.
Right.
But, you know, that down from where we are, up on the top of Bellevue, where the MVP Summit's taking place, the housing along there, that's where Bill Gates lives and a whole bunch of, you know, big Microsoft people.
And it's weird when you come to the campus, Microsoft campus, it looks just so removed from city life.
It's very much a university look, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's fun to be here.
It's great to be here. Martin Woodward's here. Beth Massi's here. We're going to be talking in just a few minutes. But first, Better Know Framework.
Awesome.
Because you better.
All right, dude, what do you got?
This has nothing to do with the framework.
Nothing. Framework-free Better Know Framework today.
This is something that got by me. It's actually an article from May 26th. Of this year.
Okay.
If you go to tinyurl.com/MIDI Chrome, that's
what?
MIDI Chrome as
MIDI?
in the browser.
Who does MIDI anymore?
Apparently Google. Google Chrome gains MIDI support, enables web-based synths and DAWs, which is digital audio workstation.
Awesome.
So,
and there's a picture of DIN plugs. How long has it been since you looked at a 5-pin DIN plug?
You know, in my world, I do play with MIDI still.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
so it's part of your regular kit to this day. All
Sure.
the performances you do, there's some MIDI involved.
Well, for most people, MIDI, which stands for Musical Instrument Digital Interface, is the annoying sounds that used to pop up in 90s era websites. You know, those little songs.
You wrote a few of those.
Yeah.
You're not going to talk about that.
No, we won't talk about that. But this will actually enable a web developer to build like an Adobe Audition or a Audacity, and that runs in the web, so you can record multi-track audio in a freaking browser.
That's really interesting. So this is really about handling multiple streams of data.
Yeah.
And being time sensitive, right? If you think about what MIDI was actually good at, it's that time signature multi-stream effect.
Yeah, and fortunately, MIDI is not dense data, right? As compared to digital audio. But so, and I'm not exactly sure what, digital audio workstation, how that relates to MIDI in the browser, but that might have been a jump on my part. But having MIDI in the browser will allow for web synths, which is basically, you plug in your keyboard with a MIDI cable to your laptop or whatever, and the laptop has a synth app that is typically a desktop app. Now it can run in a browser.
I'm at websynths.com, and it's a synthesizer.
Yeah.
So I'm going to leave the audio off, but there you go. Okay.
It's a little strange.
It's a little strange. Just sort of a flash from the past, plus it's sort of showing off just how far the browser's come.
Did you say a flash from the past?
It is a flash from the past. No pun intended.
I cringe every time I hear
flash.
The word flash. All right, well, that's what I got.
That's cool.
Who's talking to us today, Richard?
Grabbed a comment off of show 1140, the one we did with one Jay Schmelzer, when we were talking about the evolution of the .NET Core, including going open source and the foundation, which I suspect is going to come up today in our conversations.
Probably.
Oddly enough. And this comment's from David Cox, who says, I, for one, am really excited about the potential for open sourcing the .NET Core. I currently develop software designed for process and control, including the HMI and controllers. The .NET environment is by far my favorite for HMI solutions. It's not the most common to use, but I found it to be viable and a rapid solution framework. We're on the cusp of an industrial revolution in the SCADA space. You heard this term, SCADA?
Oh, yeah. That's it's kind of like MIDI. It's an acronym that stands for something to do with control.
Yes, supervisory control and data acquisition.
And why I know about that is I've been looking into the gas and oil field,
right,
where SCADA systems are prevalent and actually kind of outdated.
Exactly.
And very vulnerable to security hacks. In fact, famously, one pipeline in the Ukraine or in Russia somewhere in the 80s was attacked. In the 80s?
Yeah.
I think it was. Maybe it was the 90s. Was attacked and exploded. Basically, they hacked in and said, oh, the pressure is high when it was low here and low when it was high here, and reversed the pressure, basically, and it
blew
exploded.
The pipeline apart.
Yeah.
Well, there's a few virus type attacks going on like that. That this is current, and it feels to me like SCADA is to EDI. Right? EDI was the old data exchange approach that we used for moving data around before XML and internet really became popular. So I think SCADA is in the same vulnerable position when threatened by stuff like IoT, which is just taking this to the next level. And this is exactly what David's saying. He says, we're on the cusp of an industrial revolution in the SCADA space, and it has IoT written all over it.
Yep.
You're starting to see more object-oriented solutions in the PLC and RTU world. I, for one, would love to see the .NET environment in a controller. But I'm not sure how well that would work with RTOS, which is the real-time operating systems, right? But I can't describe how painful it is to work in the .NET space and then have to switch to an archaic language used to program a PLC.
Yep.
I'm hoping that soon the .NET environment or something similar will be available across the entire process controller space.
It's funny. You should pull that comment up. PLC stands for primary logic controller. That's the way that it's analog on the side of reading data from the sensors and then digital on the side so that you can pull data off of it. And we at AppVNext are working on a solution with a manufacturer to replace all that stuff. That's really, really secure.
I think it's
IoT
a big
wise. area
of a race going on to try to bring all that together.
Yep.
So super relevant in the stuff that we're doing these days. David,
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for your comment. A .NET Rocks mug is on its way to you. And if you'd like a .NET Rocks mug, write a comment on the website at .NETRocks.com or via any of the social media we posted. We put every show up on Google Plus and Facebook, and you can respond there. And if we read that on the show, we'll send you a mug.
And we also tweet. I'm at Carl Franklin. He's at Rich Campbell. Feel free to tweet. We read them all. And that brings us to our guests. Sitting right across from us, it's such a luxury. Beth Massi is a senior program manager on the Visual Studio team at Microsoft. Been on the show many times. She's also a community champion for .NET developers. Manages content and community activities for the engineering team, as well as customer relations and events. Before Microsoft, Beth spent 15 years building business apps for small businesses, as well as large enterprises, primarily on the .NET stack. She's a speaker at various software development events, and you can find her on a variety of developer sites, including msdn.com, Channel 9, and her blog, bethmassi.com, the BETHMASSI.com. Follow her on Twitter at Beth Massi. Martin Woodward, also been on the show many times, is the executive director of the .NET Foundation, where he helps foster open development and collaboration around .NET. He is also a principal program manager on the .NET team in Microsoft. Before joining the .NET Foundation, Martin worked on the team that introduced Git into Visual Studio and was responsible for ensuring that Mac and Linux developers could be successful collaborating with Visual Studio Online and Team Foundation Server. And we also like the way he says the word boogs.
Or naughty. Naughty is another word that always makes Americans giggle. When I was coming in, I just flew in on Monday, and when I was coming into Newark, it was great. Got into Newark, always come through Newark because I prefer it to Heathrow, which says a lot about how much I hate Heathrow. Than how much I like Newark.
Because a lot of people don't like. You're talking about the lesser of two evils. There's nothing good there.
And I was in Newark, and then all the flights started getting delayed, and I was like, oh, what's going on? And somebody came over the tannoy and said, sorry, there was a bit of a delay. President Obama was speaking lately, and so we've had to shut the airfield for a presidential movement. And
nice.
To British toilet humour, that was hilarious. Wow, that's a good movement. I've cleared a room before, but never an entire city.
Wow. Guy went in the bathroom, closed the whole airport.
Anyway.
I love this show.
Awesome.
So what's going on with you guys? Beth, how have you been?
Hey, man, it's good to see you guys.
Yeah.
See you guys.
Yeah.
Right? Last time we did a podcast, I think it was over the phone or something. And
Probably.
then, we've done those over the phone.
We
and
had
then we had a road
The last
show.
one was
But
a 2012 road trip.
that's right. It's been a while,
Yeah,
actually.
so it would have been the San Francisco area. That's 2012. That's old.
Yeah.
That's too long.
I
Ms.
have seen
Massi.
you, though.
Yes. Well, we were both at your wedding.
You were both at my wedding last year.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
It's been a year.
It's been a year. It's
Yeah,
been 1
that's
year.
awesome.
Yeah, very
And
happy.
it's a different Microsoft now.
It's really actually a lot has changed in a year in my life and
Holy
at
crap.
work.
Yeah, no
It's
kidding.
been fun. Actually, it's been amazing. So yeah, I'm working with Martin. We're on the same team, on the .NET team, and God, so much stuff is happening with .NET. It's amazing.
I find it hard to convince people who are still stuck with the mental model of the 90s Microsoft, and all the things that went on there with, Silverlight and all of this other stuff and web forms and, people still are there, and it's hard to sort of shake them and say, look at what we're doing here. It's open source. You can just go download stuff and play with it,
I think that it's true. It's like .NET equaled Windows.
Yeah.
Right.
Equaled Windows.
Yeah.
And now it's like we have to try and figure out how do we, and it did and was like that for 15 years. So
Right.
when just now is it cross-platform, right? And we're on the verge of this release that's going to be cross-platform. And how do we kind of change people's perceptions and get other people to look at .NET that aren't on the Windows stack? That's going to be a challenge.
It's funny how different things are now.
Oh, it's
in
ridiculous.
the early days of .NET, when it was all about Java. Java was one language, any platform, and .NET was any language, one platform.
Right.
Now Java's all these different languages, right? The JVM runtime is turned in. They run Ruby against it, and they run Clojure against it. It's like it's gone its own crazy way, and .NET is now. Well, there's a few languages. I don't think as much as emphasis on multiple languages, but clearly going cross-platform.
The biggest language, I mean, obviously C# is huge in VB.NET, but
Sure.
we also the F# community is just going great guns. And you talk about some of the the programmable logic controllers and things like that. There's teams working to actually take the F# compiler and have it compile to GPUs and things, because F#'s an amazing language to be able to parallelize and put over GPUs, and so you're starting to get GPUs in servers and things like that as well, which is quite interesting to be able to specialize processing.
Yeah, being able to harness GPUs in the cloud, right?
Yeah.
Like basically GPU as a service, which is really an interesting way to
That's
think
an
about
idea,
it.
huh?
I've it's a show that's in the back of my head. I have a friend who worked heavily with astronomers. And astronomers, it's not people looking through telescopes anymore, right? It's all of this electronics involved in capturing images and doing processing on them. And so he was building out these machines with stacks of, literally cramming them with NVIDIA CUDA boards.
Yeah.
As much GPU as you could get to do the rendering. The idea that they could just harness that in the cloud is kind of astonishing.
That's actually how I got into programming. So I did, my major was in physics with astronomy. And one of the projects we've just brought into the .NET Foundation recently is the Worldwide Telescope. So you know about worldwidetelescope.org?
Yes.
It's a great application.
Yeah.
It's kind of like Google Maps but pointing the other way.
Yeah,
kind of
look
thing.
it up.
Well, you haven't said that. They do have some planetary data as well, so you can go explore Mars and things
That's really cool.
with the real data sets. I was on a conference call because they're now going through the process of being a closed source product that came from Microsoft to become a proper community and involve in the astronomy community, and having the astronomy community actually drive the application forwards.
Sure.
And it's used for serious, actual, real astronomy and proper research. And I was sitting on a phone call the other day, because one of the things the .NET Foundation do is help projects and help .NET community people become better at being open. And so I kind of sit in and help, with a few different projects, listen to how they're working, give them mentoring and advice and things like that.
If you think about it, the whole scientific process is an open source process, right? I mean, you do an experiment, you publish your results, and you publish how you did your experiment, so
review.
everybody else can do it and validate it, and people contribute to it. And so, it's only natural that software would go that way.
Definitely, but scientists think very differently about software to software engineers. Like we're used to working with people who like programming for liking programming's sake,
Right.
Yeah.
Whereas the astronomers are very, very, specialized in the areas that they know to solve a particular problem. Like, I'll figure out how to do GPU programming so I can massively, collapse a galaxy in real time.
And if you've ever read any scientist's source code,
yeah. Wait, it now explains my source code, Beth. But but no, it's pretty. On this call, there's like the guy saying, "Oh yeah, my name's such and such. I manage all the space telescope data for NASA."
Wow.
Period. I'm like,
yeah.
okay. And then the other guy's like, "Hi, I'm such and such. I manage all the data for all the telescopes in Hawaii."
Right.
Okay, these guys are actually, doing some
These
serious
are
stuff
the guys.
that are producing the real data sets that then anyone in the world can do actual real research on, because it's the actual scientific data. Somebody in an astronomy department doesn't have access to any special data now that you don't have access to.
This portion of .NET Rocks is brought to you by our friends at Stackify. If your app runs on Azure, or if you're considering launching in Azure soon, Stackify is the only integrated APM and error log management platform that was designed with Azure in mind. Stackify's Azure expertise can identify problems before you launch and help you know the difference between apps problems and Azure problems so you can fix issues fast. Try Stackify now for free and get the hilarious Developers Against Humanity card game. Use the link bit.ly/netrocks.
So the .NET Foundation, let's just naturally go there, because this is sort of where all the Microsoft projects are going. And what isn't open sourced now
in the .NET world?
Yeah.
So it's first of all what the .NET Foundation is.
Yeah, tell us.
So it's the foundation that exists to make sure that .NET has an open, innovative, collaborative ecosystem around it, and be very welcoming, be very, commercially friendly, be an ecosystem that we think will succeed. Mm-hmm. The interesting thing about the .NET Foundation, especially as we've come on, is we've grown to realize it's a non-goal for every single project that's in .NET to be in the .NET Foundation, because that's not healthy for the .NET ecosystem.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Healthy ecosystems are diverse ecosystems.
Right.
And so if everything was in the .NET Foundation, then that'd be
You're
bad.
back to a monoculture again.
Exactly.
And that was my next question. Is why do we need this? Why isn't GitHub enough?
Yeah. Well, GitHub provides a forge, and that's where, the vast majority of projects are either on GitHub or Coplex or in the .NET Foundation. And they provide, source control, work item tracking systems.
Yeah, and that sends a community to make contributions to the work, that kind of thing. Yeah,
and the workflows for managing those contributions and doing pull requests and things. But then, so the foundation provides a bunch of services. What does the .NET ecosystem need? Well, we need the place you go to register all your .NET libraries and get them into Visual Studio. So NuGet.org, so that's in the .NET Foundation. And there's these central core services that we need to provide for the community. So let's be part of those. Let's do them. And then we need to, as there are projects developing, one of the problems, coming from the ecosystem we were in back in the 90s, and, a lot of the developers from Microsoft or who have naturally gravitated to Microsoft technologies are less familiar with open source than people in, say, the Java world or people in, different worlds. And so we've got a job to do to try and help educate our community about open source, educate them how to do a pull request, educate them to the fact that if you're playing with a method in the framework, I remember, like 5 years ago, had a problem with invoking a process. And when I was invoking a process, the environment variables all went into lowercase. And it just so happened if you were working with a different thing like Ant in the Java world, it was expecting them to be case preserved.
Wow.
And so all the environment variables are now lowercase. And I was like, what's going wrong? So in those days, what you did was you fired up Reflector and you went and you looked into the framework and you figured out what the problem was. And you're like, oh, dude, they're using, I don't know what it was, like a dictionary or something like that rather than what they should be using. And it turned all the keys into lowercase.
Huh.
And because all of our code didn't really care about case. They never saw the problem. I was like, hey, there's a problem here.
Right.
And so I could send them a pull, I could send them a request and say, I raised a bug in Connect, which is what we used to do kind of thing. We still do kind of. We raised the bug in Connect, told them what the problem was and told them the exact couple of lines I thought was the problem. And then, I think they did that in 2005 and I think it got fixed in like framework 4.5 or something like that. Because the team had to pick it up and put it in and it had to go in and roll it out. Nowadays, I could send a pull request and that would be in that afternoon.
Right.
And so anyway, but so we provide a core set of services.
I think the .NET Foundation also provides a center of gravity for projects that if you're coming from the outside of Microsoft, kind of seeing what, like literally center of gravity around bringing more community, bringing that, kind of the guidance that we bring to projects is one thing, but the visibility is also another.
Right.
Okay. So that, like literally if you're like, well, what's .NET doing? Wow, wait, there's an ecosystem here, and so it kind of provides that center of gravity.
Yeah, it provides the gravity. And then for the projects that we do have, we make sure like they have access to IP and legal services and stuff like that. As you get to become a big boy project, you kind of, you need to worry about IP sometimes.
Right.
And we need to worry about legal stuff and trademarks and blah, blah, blah.
A lot of services.
And and then we have a bunch of like technical services. So GitHub provide, the central Forge, or Coplex provide the Forge services. So source control, work item tracking, things like that.
And there's a certain amount of, you can't start a GitHub project without declaring a license.
Yes, one of the things we try and do is help people know you really do need a license because it's not actually open source if you started a project without a license.
And really we want, I'm working on Humanitarian Toolbox.
Yes.
And so it's also the contributor licensing.
Yeah.
It's like it's important that each contributor agrees to a license for what their contributions mean, as well as the project license as a whole.
And we help projects manage that whole process too.
Yeah.
So as you're pulling things into the .NET Foundation, you're sort of cleaning this up, like
making
sure it's all.
We don't clean it up. We would talk to the project. So like with I work quite a lot with Bill Wagner on he's on the Humanitarian Toolbox project, but he's also on the .NET Foundation Advisory Council. And Bill's actually been really helpful. We've been talking to the Prism project, so the Brian Noyes and Brian Lagunas have been working on taking Prism and actually building that out as a proper open source project now.
Yeah, we talked to them on the show about it.
Bill has been really helpful because he knows a lot about running communities because he's had the Humanitarian Toolbox stuff. We assign people a mentor as they come into the foundation to try and help them, do stuff and give them advice and look at how they're doing their READMEs, sit in some of their community reviews. And that's one of the areas where Bill's been really helpful and said, hey, why didn't you, we need to enable contribution license agreements, so let's get those enabled and then work with me to actually get those.
Think through those things.
Well, there are a bunch of other technical services you need as well, like you talk about contribution license agreements.
Yep.
They're important as you get to become a bigger project to make sure the contributions coming in, are you can have a traceable IP. So that, they can, and if somebody is wanting to embed your open source library in a commercial application, it makes that easier. Therefore, you're likely to get more people using it. Therefore, you're likely to get more people contributing to it. So that's why.
Well, I think you need to make it clear to contributors what could happen to their code.
Exactly, and be honest.
You're just trying not to. Well, people don't like betrayed expectations.
Exactly.
That's not what I thought I was contributing to.
So
you've got to be very clear as to where that comes from.
But to make sure that's done, you want to painless the process as possible to make sure you don't lose. As an open source project, you want fingers on keyboards giving you code.
You do not want to hand somebody something and say, you should take this to your lawyer before you start typing.
Yeah, exactly.
That's not a good path to be on.
So we have a CLA automation system that we just set up, and then we can roll out across any project in the foundation so that we can people can send a pull request in and a little robot comes in and says, hey, brilliant, thanks for your contribution. We haven't had a contribution from you before. Do you mind signing this?
Right.
And they go in, log in with their GitHub ID. It sends them to a place called DocuSign, which is whatever. But they basically go in, confirm their email address is what they're really doing, and they're signing a legally binding agreement then that is in the contribution license agreement. And it's done, but it's done, and then they don't have to do it ever again for any other .NET Foundation project.
Nice.
So when we think about the projects that are there, and you said it's not a good idea to put everything up there.
Definitely.
When you say everything, are you sort of excluding a class of projects, like maybe the more Windows centric ones, and you want the open source ones up there, or what is the guidelines there?
So there's a couple of types. So we have the What I don't want is for it to be a graveyard of like Microsoft open source projects.
No
Turns out-
dumping.
Exactly.
Right.
Well, it turns out Microsoft is really good at open source nowadays, and they can actually do open source projects without them having to be in some magic separate company that's not Microsoft.
Right.
Microsoft have, github.com, whack Microsoft. I know. I created that account,
We've really come a long way,
there are
actually.
hundreds and
that.
hundreds of repositories.
Our open source policy at Microsoft has changed for the better over the course of the last just year, even. I think a lot of large enterprises are actually thinking really hard about what their open source policies really are, like how they can enable their own employees to go out and contribute to open source is a big deal. Actually, some companies don't allow it at all.
Sure.
Yeah.
No,
So-
we hear about that all the time.
But Microsoft
we've come
actually have
very
really
far.
permissive.
Yeah,
like
very
our
per-
rules for contributing are cool. If it's in your own time, go for it, kind of thing. And then if you're trying to do it through work, then you go and get your line manager's authorization, kind of thing. But
that's kind
generally,
of why we
can
created
contribute.
MS OpenTech
It is,
originally. Right, but now we don't really need MS OpenTech anymore because of
What's
how things
MS
have changed.
OpenTech?
MS OpenTech was a kind of a subsidiary, it was separate of Microsoft, and you would to go contribute to open source, you would kind of they would borrow an employee. You would actually become an employee, technically, of MS OpenTech to go work on open source. Don't have to do that anymore.
Wow.
So basically, if you've ever read The Innovator's Dilemma, and if you haven't read The Innovator's Dilemma and you're listening, then you should. Everybody in Microsoft should be forced to read it once a year. But if you read that, one of the classic things you do when handling with the disruptive technology is to go incubate it in a separate little company that isn't encumbered by the rules of the big company.
Right.
Go and incubate it in a separate little company that can just look at that problem and do it how they think it should be done, and then learn from that. And that's kind of what we did with MS OpenTech. Is we set up this little company that didn't have any of the rules of big bad Microsoft. We then figured out how to do open source, and then we then fixed Microsoft to be able to do open source properly, and that's where we're at today, where we can do open source.
And I remember the announcements of them rolling up MS OpenTech. And
Into the
those
company.
people came in back in the regular
now
market.
they work in DevDiv.
They
They're
work in
part of
DevDiv,
their
yeah.
team.
So let's get back for a minute.
There's
if we
some of
could,
the services at the foundation. So there's the CLA stuff. And then there's all the stuff that if you're doing an open source project, it's like really annoying as an individual to go get like SSL certificates. If you don't have a company behind them, like getting one, you have to pay for them, blah, blah, blah. Codes, doing Authenticode signing. You remember when if you're doing an open source project and then you download it in a browser and then the smart screen stuff starts screaming at you because you don't have it signed. Well, how do you get a certificate? It turns out, again, that can be quite hard and you have to pay for them and things.
Right.
Managing of secrets. Here's one we've had one of the projects I involved with, in my spare time, a thing called libgit2. That's like the Git, a Git library. There's a Twitter account associated with libgit2. None of us can remember who created it. None of us can remember what the password is.
Oh man.
Welcome.
Yeah.
We've all done it.
And this is, and so managing these secrets and things and making sure that a project is open source is sustainable, you're just handy if you have some of this infrastructure in place. So we help provide some of this infrastructure for our projects. Domains, if you want to go register a domain, again, that's easy enough. You go to Hover or wherever and buy one, but, again, you've got to pay for it. And where does that money come from? DNS, making sure your DNS server's all there, set up, secure. Having some forums infrastructure in place because GitHub doesn't, Coplex has forums, but GitHub doesn't have forums. So what's your project going to do for forums? Well, set up a discourse forum. We do that for people. Access to email, access to, software. We can work with different suppliers to get access to software. We have a swag repository, which is Beth's and
submit
Casey's
your
idea.
artwork and we'll get it on a t-shirt. You can buy t-shirts through Spreadshirt. So I think Scott Hanselman mentioned he was going to submit some artwork.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's just like, Beth's, you can't see on the podcast, obviously, but people
He wants the stack, like, basically what's core framework, that slide.
Shirt.
He wants the slide on a
and
shirt.
people
I'm
can take the
we can do
t-shirts
that.
that you see, because in the team we always had this. When we were a team inside Microsoft, we had this rich community of people who would build like team t-shirts, and then we would share the team t-shirts. Turns out the team doesn't all work in Microsoft anymore.
Yeah,
the team is spread across the world, and so we have to figure out a way of taking that kind of thing that was quite cool about how our team worked and make it work virtually. So we just have a swag repository where we can check in the artwork and then it appears in the store. And if people want to take the a .NET shirt they saw at Build and then remix it and turn it, it's all Creative Commons CC0 license.
It's interesting that it's not just software that's in the open source, the .NET Foundation.
No, that's there's documentation and things. The swag one's probably fairly special.
So github.com/.net.
Yeah.
That's the org. Okay,
Okay.
the .NET Foundation org on GitHub.
Yep.
And that's where the swag is. That's where the docs are. The core docs are. That's where .NET
That's
is.
where the book of runtime is.
Yeah.
It explains how, that's where the spec is for, C# language and
The
things like
book
that.
That's where the CLR is.
That's
I love
where
that.
and then we also from there post when we have a design review for how the language should evolve. Again, they're no good having them in a meeting room in Redmond because the community, the team is part of the community, doesn't live in Microsoft anymore. So we have to make these open. And so they do the language reviews and they do the API design reviews on Google Hangouts and then post the videos on YouTube and all these sorts of things. And we also have, we provide some help around events and there's a really boring term called fiscal authority or whatever like that. Respect my authority. Basically, again, if you're an open source project and you want to do an Eventbrite thing, get the money you've done. When you're organizing events, you need a bank account for money to come into, so you can then pay people out. And we have a bank account, so we can do that, and we can help work with projects and provide them away. So the bunch of services. So it just helps them do open source properly. Where we don't want projects to come in, back to your question, Carl, we don't want it to be a dumping ground for random SDKs for bits of Microsoft stuff. The SDK is great that that's open source for Microsoft thing, and it's good because but it's all the value of that SDK is purely for a service that we monetize. So there's no point in that being in the foundation because, to be honest, the community aren't really going to contribute much to that. It's not community owned; it's owned by the product group producing their SDK, who just happen to deliver their thing open source.
Yes.
Even though it's implemented in, say, C# as well as probably, Objective-C or Swift or whatever in Java, that shouldn't be in the .NET Foundation because it's just open source from Microsoft .NET. It should be community-owned things, should be in the .NET
So
Foundation.
only when you see a cross contribution thing that it gets
but then there's on the other side, if you look at something like F#, once a project gets big enough and has a vibrant enough community, I'm very cool with that being its own. If that wants to have its own organization around it because it's now big enough and can scale to enough. So the F# guys have the F# Foundation, which is a 503c, a C3, a charity, that they're all grouping around, and that's great. That's success. That's
really interesting.
Diversity.
So I kind of like this idea that you would have. You start small, you get to a certain size where now the foundation makes sense for you.
Yeah.
You move into the foundation. Do you actually grow out of it at some point and move out again?
Yeah,
you could.
Definitely.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
And
we
F#
would
didn't
support
take that path, but you could have.
Probably,
timing-wise.
And I think, we think of the F# as kind of like a sister foundation as well now, and we're probably going to try and find ways of the .NET Foundation still supporting the
having
F#.
a relationship.
Exactly.
But you could see more of these forming.
Definitely.
As you get projects to a certain size, they can sustain their own community and really need their own foundation. They can go in different directions. So
they
you're
want to.
much more an incubator, where F# is, they've got a different focus. They're
grown
focused on maturing their language. So it makes sense that they would be on their own.
Yeah.
Hey, Richard,
Yeah, buddy.
guess what time it is?
It must be that happy time again.
Yep, it's time for me to announce a new open source license.
Oh.
The No Naughty Boogs license. Gist of it is, if you submit code with a naughty boog, you have to give yourself a wedgie.
Okay. Self-wedgie tools. Okay. That's something else.
Actually, it's time to give away a D-Experience subscription from Developer Express to one lucky member of the .NET Rocks fan club. But first, become a UI superhero with DevExpress UI controls and libraries and deliver elegant .NET solutions that address customer needs today and leverage your existing knowledge to build next-generation touch-enabled solutions for tomorrow. Whether it's an Office-inspired application or a data-centric analytics dashboard, DevExpress Universal ships with everything you'll need to build your best without limits or compromise. Learn more and download your free 30-day trial at devexpress.com/superhero, and definitely thank DevExpress for supporting .NET Rocks.
Awesome, dude. So who's our winner?
Today's winner, Richard, is Lance Elworth.
Congratulations, Lance. Golf clap for you,
clap
sir.
for Lance Elworth. That's our next mug. Golf clap for you,
Golf
sir.
clap for you, sir.
I love that.
Yeah, no, that's a good T-shirt.
Yeah,
actually.
we should trademark that. What's the license around? Can we?
Well, let's talk.
Yeah, all right. Excellent. And if you don't know what we're doing here, Lance Elworth just got a D-Experience subscription from Developer Express, one of our great sponsors. And you can always go to .NETRocks.com, click on the big Get Free Stuff button, answer a few questions, and join the .NET Rocks fan club. We have thousands of members all over the world. And every show, we like to give away stuff from our sponsors. And every December, we give away a $5,000 technology shopping spree to one lucky member of the .NET Rocks fan club.
It's coming up soon.
Coming up very soon. I'm getting all excited.
Next few weeks, we're going to have to do this.
Love giving away stuff. And of course, we ask our guests. I guess we'll start with you, Beth. If you had $5,000 to spend on technology today, what would you buy?
That's a tough one. Buy technology, huh? Do I have to spend it on technology?
What gadget don't you have?
Actually, guys, I'm not really a big gadget girl, but my husband is.
Yeah, it's true.
He's huge.
But you're a car girl. People don't
I'm
know
car.
that.
I'm more of a car girl.
I've had a ride in your car.
I actually want a 69 Camaro.
Do you?
Wow.
Does that count?
For $5,000.
I'd need 10 grand though.
For $5,000, you could get a pretty nasty, rusted out.
I could get one that I could fix. I just make sure it runs.
Yeah.
I could totally.
Are
do
you into
that.
auto mechanics? Do you like fixing cars?
Actually, I like to actually get a broken car that looks good because I'm better at the mechanics than the
Better at the motor than the body.
Than the body work. Yeah.
With you. Totally.
So okay. Does that count? 69 Camaro.
That's a great one. I love
Fairly
it.
technological for the time.
Yeah. 100%.
Awesome. What about you, Martin?
I just spent some money before I came out here. Actually, I'm a bit of a nerd on the Atlantic Telegraph is a thing that I do a lot of research on. You should do, if you haven't done already, a geek out on the physical internet.
Yeah.
Because just knowing how the internet actually really works is just amazing. And once you actually understand about internet exchanges and things, the IXs, and you start looking into the IX registries, and you see, Microsoft has like a presence in like every single IX, the entire world, and with Google and Facebook, and that's why it feels like when you're talking to your Azure app, that's why it feels like your Azure app has more bandwidth than God, because you don't have to go through the entire internet to get to Azure. You can just jump into your local thing. So
there's a whole conversation there about BGP routing. Like people just don't know how kind of archaic it is, right?
And it all started
Trace route.
And all this started from, the original was obviously the Atlantic Telegraph was the the first big submarine cable, which is where all this technology comes from. So I actually, just before I came out, bought a piece of the original 1858 Atlantic Telegraph cable. So that should be there when I get home.
Yeah, they've been replacing a lot of those wires. They've been taking them up, and they are artifacts of our history.
Oh yeah, they're amazing. So I've got some of that. But no, the thing I would buy for $5,000, that was like $100. That doesn't count. The thing I would buy for $5,000. So I mentioned I did my degree in physics, so I would buy. I don't have. I like doing astronomy, and used to do it. I did research where you have a proper observatory where you go in and you have your telescope set up. Yep. But that's a pain because you have to get them all aligned, and then you have to get the sidereal mounts working so it tracks the sky properly and things like that. But now you can have telescopes. The Celestron do a new type of telescope system where you sit it down, put it on a telegraph, you press a button, and it goes. Takes a picture, and then the computer figures out where it's looking at, and it goes zip, takes another picture, and it goes zip, zip, zip. The stepper motors move around, and it figures out exactly where it's pointing.
Right.
And it goes, okay, what would you like to look at, sir? And you go, I'd look at the Crab Nebula, and it goes zip, and then puts you on the Crab Nebula. And you go, okay, that's easy.
Wow.
Normally with astronomy, you have to spend ages, and you're freezing, and you're in the middle of the night, and you're looking out, and you get it all lined up, and you finally find it. You don't have to do that anymore. Just press the button.
And there's some folks who think that calculating azimuth is part of the fun.
Yeah.
There's some people just want to see some cool stuff.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's kind of amazing to think where people have gone at it.
Yeah,
last week wasn't Mars, Jupiter, and
they're all
Venus
lined
all
up.
was aligned up, right? It was last
amazing.
week.
I took that you can see with your binoculars as well.
Yeah.
So I got my kids, Ivan was just thinking I'm the nerdiest guy around. So shake them up, wake them up at 3 o'clock in the morning.
That's cool.
Kids, look, you can see.
I did that.
Even with binoculars, you can see Venus and see the crescent shape. It's the actual planet, not just a bright light.
I was thinking, what was it, 2005 when we had that incredible meteor shower here, the Leonids?
The Leonids.
I think it was the Leonids. Yeah, and one year there was, from where we were on the East Coast anyway, you could see one meteor every 10 seconds or something. It was just unbelievable. And I remember I did wake up my daughter.
Yeah.
Brought her outside.
You got to see this.
We had that. So I live quite far north, Northern Ireland, where I live, further north than parts of Alaska. And so we reasonably often would get the northern lights visible from where we are. So again, that's another, when the northern lights were particularly visible one time, I woke up the kids and was like, come and have a look at this.
During Solar Max, when
it's quite busy at the minute. Interestingly, my wife, different people have different night vision. And so me and the kids are outside going, whoa, that's amazing. My wife comes out, she's like, what? She couldn't see it because her eyes didn't respond to the deep green.
Yeah. So if you got a little bit of green blindness, you won't see it.
Yeah.
It's very green.
So,
I don't mean to subvert your 5K on a telescope.
Right, okay.
If you go to domeobservatory.com,
hello.
they actually sell home scale domes. For $5,000, you can get a 6-foot dome.
Really?
Like if you actually want to have the shelter, which helps with the light bleed and so forth. I mean, if you want to spend $50,000, they'll sell you that too. But
I just bought a field, so I could actually put this in.
You
the
could
field.
put, you need a little concrete pad, little dome. Put
So how do we fix this?
I'll deliver it to you in the Camaro.
Yeah, there we go. Deal.
I think we've totally derailed him now.
Oh, yeah. So, and the software automation for the dome pointing, you can tie it into the telescope, so the dome rotates with your telescope. I'm telling you, dude.
All right. Is that cooler than Visual Studio Code?
A little bit.
Not to me.
But you can get a lot of Visual Studio Code for 5K. You know what I mean? So people that don't know is Visual Studio Code is the free IDE. Well, it's not really an IDE. It's free development,
an
editor that we have that's fully cross-platform. So it runs on Linux, runs on the Mac, runs on Windows.
I wonder if the people that have the most trouble with the .NET Foundation are your regular .NET developers, who are used to and very comfortable with, I get my stuff from Microsoft, right? And maybe I have a couple other vendors like Telerik and DevExpress and Component One and Infogestics. Like I talk to an awful lot of the CTO types who's like, my devs want two things: their MSDN to subscription and their tool set. Yeah. And that's all they use.
And the great thing is they can still do that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's not going away.
That's the thing. The .NET team, even though we're open source and we're out in the open, we're doing all this in the open, we're actually going to have releases, distros, you can think of it that way, where they'll be product. Like, here you go, this is the one that's stamped, blessed, and all tested together. It's that. So if you want to ignore all the open source and love that we're peace, love, happiness that we're doing right now, you can continue to still use a solid set of products and product lines from Microsoft. We're not changing that. It's just the way we're building those things is changed.
It's worth explaining how it works around it as well, because you talk about talking into CTOs and CIOs. That's one of the areas where they do get confused with, because you talk about all this open source goodness and, hey, cross-platform. Hey, we've just announced as well today, a partnership with Red Hat and
which was awesome.
So the Red Hat actually have supported .NET workloads in running in Red Hat Enterprise Linux and in the cloud and things, and that just got announced this morning. So we have all that, but that doesn't mean that the version of Visual Studio you get, even though it contains a bunch of stuff that's open source, we're giving it under the Microsoft EULA, the Microsoft license terms you've already accepted it as. It's not, you've not got to suddenly now go fill out a big open source approval process in your company. Right. You're buying the product from Microsoft. Yeah. You're buying support from Microsoft for that product.
And Visual Studio is still all about productivity. Yep. It's still all about .NET. It's more than just .NET now. Like it's like still our, premier, that is the IDE.
Not in the foundation.
Right?
I think people get a little worried when they look at the .NET Core and ASP.NET and MVC and go, now I have to use open source? Like, no, you guys build a retail version of the product from that source code.
Absolutely.
Where I think the line gets a little more interesting is I look at like Laurent Bugnon's MVVM Lite. Yeah. Right? I mean, that is an open source only project. It's in the foundation, which is why I bring it up. Yeah. And so I think folks who are sort of, here's one of the guys, been on the show before, and I consider him a friend, like a nice guy.
He's awesome.
But he brought MVVM to us.
Yeah.
This was to us like, you want to learn MVVM? Here's how you do this. Yeah. Now it's in the foundation. So do I feel better about it as a Microsoft stack guy, thinking I want to use this MVVM Lite? What does the foundation do to that project from my perspective?
One of the interesting things I've found is
support.
Support. We provide support and help the sustainability of it.
You should feel more confident.
That's what I'm thinking. Is that the message here is, now that it's in the foundation, don't worry about it going away. It's kind of safe.
Well, that's the thing. We like all of the mentorships that we provide, around just governance around the project.
You don't need to give Lauren any mentorship.
True enough. But it's sort of like, okay, so Lauren wants to retire, right? But because we have now a community and an ecosystem around this project too, someone else could just take over the reins.
I trust Laurent, but not everybody knows him as well as I do. The fact that it's in the foundation says you don't have to trust that individual as much as you know that the foundation is here to make sure that project stays
continues.
But the foundation
I like
also
that.
needs to make sure that you can find, if you're in Visual Studio and you're looking for an open, a library to go solve a problem.
Yeah.
Right.
Like
That this is a great place to
image
look.
processing. Well, but we need to make sure that they can find the open source that they're after, regardless of if it's in the foundation or not. This back to my diversity thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that's why we need to make sure things like NuGet and things are very strong, and so that people can go get the library they want to solve, and people in the .NET ecosystem learn how to do open source, regardless of it having to be in the foundation.
Right.
For Linux, let's talk about the stuff that's there for Linux. It's mostly the server side things, right? ASP.NET.
That's the main workloads we see people wanting to run on Linux.
Yeah.
Are deploying ASP.NET applications, so DNX stuff, microservices into Linux
Containers.
Linux containers basically. So I was talking to some, like some banks, and a common thing they want to do is they've got algorithms written in C#, written in some F# stuff as well. They've got Excel spreadsheets with a thing around them. They've got Java stuff. They've got some C code written in Solaris, and they just want a big server farm that they can take these and run them as calculation farms. And so you can now have .NET running on that in your Linux farm inside a Docker container.
So they've got an operations team that wants to run a set of Linux servers.
Exactly. Great.
No problem.
And make sure the performance there, make sure the end-to-end support there as well. So if this is why the deal we announced with Red Hat this morning was so important, because if you want to pick up the phone to have a problem with your container running in Red Hat Linux, but it's an ASP.NET workload, you don't want to get stuck in one of those bouncing around.
You should call Microsoft about that.
Yeah, exactly. So we have Microsoft support people co-located with Red Hat support people.
Wow.
And this gets back to my original comment here, which is I find myself just having to explain the availability of this stuff to people who just can't
That's the biggest
conceive
problem.
that Microsoft would be, supporting Linux, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you basically have slashed the cost of server farms for everybody with Azure and Docker and ASP.NET. I mean, the price of operation just went way down for so many people.
That is the problem, is getting people to even think about it. I mean, Beth
That's
lives
kind
in
of what
the
I was
Valley,
saying in the
so-
beginning. It's like, .NET equals Windows. That's equaled Windows.
Yeah,
it's not
it's
true
not true.
anymore. I mean, and it's not just about ASP.NET. It's about, writing just EXEs. It's like services that are headless, kind of services too right now. So that's kind of where we're focusing right now. It's interesting when I talk to, .NET developers today that have been building on the stack for, ever, and they just kind of look like, what are you doing? Why?
Yeah, why can't I
And
build
I'm
my
like, hey,
WinForms
if you're
app on
happy
Linux?
with Windows servers, by all means, this is not, that doesn't change your world. What this does is just opens up opportunities, right? And it opens up opportunities for people that would never look at .NET because we can't even be part of the conversation because they are a Linux shop.
Yeah, it's easy to see the economics and the incentives for Microsoft for doing this. You have shifted as a company from selling copies of Windows for metal machines to Azure. And, if Azure is really where the future of Microsoft is, then you need to enable everybody to come to the party. And so it's very understandable, from when you think about the incentives that Microsoft has from a business point of view, it makes perfect sense. It's just amazing to me how people are stuck with that mentality of,
if you haven't
90s
caught on to the
mentality.
cloud, then you couldn't understand why Microsoft would do that.
Absolutely.
And I should be clear, like on the .NET team itself, we actually don't care where you deploy.
Yeah.
We really just want you to be able to write, C# wherever you want, right? And write VB.NET wherever you want. Write F# wherever you want. Like this sort of like on the team, we look at it like, hey, have fun deploying that wherever you want. Our goal is to make sure that it works wherever.
We want .NET to be the most productive development environment there is.
Yeah,
Right.
we want people to fall in love with .NET, the reasons why we fell in love with
Yeah.
.NET, back 15 years ago, right?
And there's tooling makes us productive, but there's also the ecosystem around .NET that makes .NET productive. And that's why we need to make sure the more people we have deploying .NET workloads in different places, the more libraries get built for .NET.
Yep.
And then so the more people are productive with .NET, and then so the virtuous cycle continues.
I think Java actually has one up on us for
right
that,
now.
for sure. Because, it started out like open ecosystem, like they've had a head start for
Yeah.
a very long time. You know, I think there's a cultural difference between developers on those stacks, you know, like you were mentioning before, Richard, like that, you know, .NET developers expect, you know, a certain level of quality because this comes from Microsoft.
Right.
This framework is, you know, is written by computer scientists at Microsoft.
Yeah.
Therefore, it's awesome and I'm going to use it. And if I have a bug, I'm going to tell you to go fix it.
Yeah.
Right.
And
that was the
get
expectation for so many years. Right. And I think on the other end of the spectrum, I feel like you probably can talk to Java a little bit better, but I feel like, you know, that community just said, well, I'm going to go fix it. And actually, I'm going to write another library that does this and that and thing. And so the core product didn't actually have to be like completely awesome because you had all of these other community supported, you know,
there was a price to
libraries
that,
that
too.
were awesome.
I remember in the height of EJB, I mean, just figuring out what your stack was going to be for a given project. Right? You know, are you going down the Tomcat line? Are you going down the JBoss line? Like there was all these tribes.
Yeah, there's almost too many.
It was confusing. You know, in a lot of
that's
ways.
One of the things we've got to figure out how we go forwards because we're having more diversity now. But it's one of the things I worry about is that people will think
we don't want chaos.
Well, no, but also that people will think the IOC container to pattern to use is the one that's in the foundation, or I actually don't want that to happen, which is because it should be the best one that's suitable for your task.
You don't want to be opinionated,
exactly.
But you don't want 100 of them either.
Yeah, exactly.
You want more than one.
Yeah,
but you don't want 100.
And one of the things we need to do as well is so we have .NET Core, and .NET Core is the cross-platform open .NET. That's not, there's desktop framework, which you can go see the source to for your reference source. But then you have .NET Core, which is the open source, heart of the modern future .NET.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we're going to start doing, probably as this podcast gets broadcast, is actually reaching out with the community a lot more and trying to help all the different library producers, maintainers, and also vendors actually go get their .NET and their open source libraries all working against .NET Core and porting to .NET Core and being able to do that. That's the next. We need to get the ecosystem moved over so that .NET Core can be there, so that then you can take advantage of that in your Linux workload or on the Mac.
Yeah, the idea is like when we release, the first version of .NET Core, then we want to have a good set of libraries that people rely on now against framework for Core as well. Yeah. Plus, basically porting to Core is important.
Yeah, because when you go build your Linux app, it's no good if you can't now talk to Redis or talk to whatever. You need all these other ancillary libraries or JSON.NET, or you can't run your unit tests. All those things have to be there before you can build your line of business.
And where does PCL, Portable Class Libraries, come into the picture here?
Yeah, so there's the PCL libraries is a similar mechanism, and so you can build. There's a you have a project.json file in the new world, and in that project.json file, you can declare a library as being able to create a PCL version of it and create a .NET Core version of it, and so you can
targets frameworks.
Yeah, target framework targeting.
So that's really
kind of
important.
like the tokens there.
That's really important what you just said. Yeah. Those are two different things. .NET Core and PCL are two different things.
Yeah, even within PCL, you could target different versions like Windows Phone 8.1 or Silverlight or whatever, and so you need to be able to target both. But both in sides. The project, we've got some documentation that will come up by the time this show is produced. If you go to aka.ms whack port to core, so port number 2 core, CORE, then that'll send you to the documentation. I'll go create that now while we're talking.
Great.
By the way, yes.
So I better not go look it up right now.
Yeah. We actually had the hackathon, the MVP Summit hackathon on Thursday. So by the time this podcast, we had a hackathon.
Yeah.
So there should actually be some really good docs by the time this airs.
Nice.
There.
Great.
Yeah.
Well,
So
timing
I'm
is
running
everything.
the table, so it should be fun.
Excellent.
Yeah, that should be really interesting. I'm wondering. I'm looking at the list of projects right now, and a lot of these projects were like the day one .NET Foundation projects, right? And there's been a slow increase. Are we almost done? Do you see a big burst coming as .NET Core ships? How many more things need to come into the foundation for the foundation to really realize its vision?
So we've got the core of .NET there, and now we need to where we're focusing in on is bringing in more projects that need to have help bringing the community around them.
Right.
So there's say about a couple of dozen projects in the pipeline we're talking to and seeing as we bring them into the foundation. But
and are those mostly external projects? Like
there's a mix.
There's a certain number of Microsoft projects, a certain number of third party.
Yeah, and there's a mix, and that's how it should be.
Yeah,
a healthy mix. One of the things where the foundation works really well is if we're taking a Microsoft project, but what was a Microsoft developed project and maybe was gonna just sit there and not get much love anymore, but there's a passionate community who want to set it free,
right?
Then one of the things that we've been doing lately a lot of is talking to the community members and going, okay, let's go help you. I will go and find the person in Microsoft who owns that code,
right?
And we will get them to donate it to us, so you can now be the maintainer of it.
So, can a project start as a Windows-only project and then go into the foundation, and people will convert it to core and update it from there?
Worldwide Telescope's a great example. I mean, it doesn't have to be in core. It can be a desktop framework.
All right. Well, let's drop a couple of bombs then. The ones that we kept in emails about, like Visual Basic 6.
Yeah.
It's not .NET.
I totally agree it's not .NET, and I also have a pretty good sense of the complexity of the state of licensing around it. There's lots of things.
Interestingly, the licensing's not the problem, mostly. It's the build systems.
Yeah.
The build system. I've heard this a few times.
Wow.
So we have to have, to be able to have a sustainable open source project, people need to be able to build it on their desktop and be able to test it and be able to, and you actually need to be able to have that environment, and that needs to be easy. So most of the work we do when we're taking a project and making it open source, a Microsoft project,
taking it out of Microsoft,
is making the build system sane,
right?
And
getting it out of the internal Microsoft plumbing,
of
how they build software.
Can you debug it?
Yeah,
can you
press
build
F5?
Yes.
Will it actually compile?
The amazing, you'd be horrified. I mean, Microsoft are doing a lot of work right now modernizing their internal engineering systems to make them more like what we have customers use.
But you're talking about software that's 20 years old.
Yep.
Things were different.
I mean, I'm not sure. I think there is one or two machines that can build VB6 in the company right now.
Right.
So, it's not an easy thing to do. So. But there are other ones that we should do. And so they'll be coming out hopefully by the time this is released.
Microsoft Bob?
Not .NET.
Yeah. I noticed you are writing an version of control framework. Can I help you?
Clippy.net. Now
you're getting into evil.
Well, wow, the hour's just flown by. This is really fun. I sense a lot of over talking, like talking over each other, but that's okay because that's what happens when you get four friends in a room.
Yeah.
You just want to all talk at the same time. It's great. So thank you, Beth. Thank you, Martin.
Thanks, guys.
Awesome. Very awesome. And we'll talk to you, dear listener, next time on .NET Rocks. .NET Rocks is brought to you by Franklin's Net and produced by Plop Studios, a full-service audio, video, and post-production facility located physically in New London, Connecticut, and of course in the cloud. Online at pwop.com. Visit our website at dotnetrocks.com for RSS feeds, downloads, mobile apps, comments, and access to the full archives going back to show number 1, recorded in September 2002. And make sure you check out our sponsors. They keep us in business. Now go write some code. See you next time.
Got a transmitter banned by the FCC.